Hi, I'm Lumen, and on my 18th birthday, my mom blindfolded me, smiled, said, "Time for your real gift," then drove me 200 miles out and left me at a gas station. No suitcase, no goodbye. Just the sound of gravel under her tires and the laughter of my sister echoing through an open window. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing they'd been planning it. Quietly, legally, weeks in advance. My name disappeared from the deed, my college fund vanished, and my family posted a brunch photo titled Freedom Day. Was it ever about love, or was I just a role they needed to retire? What kind of mother calls exile a gift? I didn't expect anything special that morning. 18 felt like a number, not a milestone. But when I stepped out of my room and saw my mother, Valora, standing in the kitchen with a tray of eggs, toast, and orange juice, I froze. She hadn't cooked breakfast since I was 10. "Happy birthday, Lumen," she said, setting the tray on the table like it was any ordinary Tuesday. "Get dressed. Today's your real gift. You'll never forget it." I stood there longer than I should have. Part of me wanted to ask what the catch was, but a softer part, quieter, tired, wanted to believe maybe something had shifted. Maybe turning 18 meant I was finally enough. She waited in the car. When I opened the door, there was a folded silk scarf in her hand. "No peeking. It's part of the surprise," she said with a rehearsed laugh. I raised an eyebrow, half joking. "You're not driving me to a ditch, are you?" Her lips twitched. "Don't be ridiculous." The scarf blocked everything: sunlight, context, direction. But I could tell we were heading out of Asheville. I recognized the way the road smoothed, then turned to cracked stretches flanked by open fields. The car was quiet. Too quiet. She kept the radio off. Instead, she filled the silence with questions I hadn't heard from her in years. "How's school really going? You seeing anyone? Do you think you'll stay close to home after graduation?" Every question came with a sugar-coated tone, too sweet to be real. My answers were cautious. She didn't interrupt, but she didn't listen either. No one else was in the car. Not my father. Not Callista. It hit me somewhere after the third highway exit. Every other birthday, no matter how minimal, involved the family. A cake? A sarcastic card? Something. This year, it was just us. And even that felt too deliberate. We drove for almost 3 hours. Every time I thought we'd stop, we didn't. Just long stretches of nothing. Until the car slowed down, gravel crunching under the tires. "This is it," she said. Her voice changed. "No more syrup." She got out, opened my door, and helped me out like I was delicate. "Wait right here," she said, the tone brisk now. "Don't take the blindfold off until I tell you." The sound of her heels on gravel faded quickly. Then the car door slammed. Then, silence. I waited 10 seconds, maybe 20, but the engine roared back to life. Tires spun, and she was gone. I ripped off the blindfold. I was standing at a rundown gas station, somewhere between forgotten farmland and a place nobody would look for me. Dust curled into the air as her car disappeared into the horizon. No balloons, no cake. Just cracked concrete and a vending machine that buzzed like it was dying. I turned slowly, trying to process what had just happened. There wasn't even a bench. Inside the station, a man behind the counter blinked when he saw me. He looked me over. Blue dress, hair done, mascara now clumping. "You all right, miss?" "My mom left," I said. "I need to make a call." He handed me his landline like it wasn't the strangest request he'd had all day. I dialed her cell with shaking fingers. She picked up on the second ring. "You're 18 now," Valora said flatly. "This is your start. You wanted independence. Go earn it." Then she hung up. I called again, straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. Back outside, I sat on the curb and stared at the road. The heat rose in waves from the pavement. I took off my shoes and pressed my bare feet to the ground, trying to feel something. trying to prove I was still real. I wanted to cry, or scream, or run. But none of those would have changed the fact that this was real. Was it a punishment? A statement? A clean break? A part of me kept whispering, maybe she thought this would help you grow. But deeper down, the truth was louder. She wanted me gone, fully, quietly. I sat there for I don't know how long. Cars came and went. None stopped. The sky turned a different shade of blue, one that felt lonelier. A low rumble pulled my attention to the side. A pickup truck pulled into the lot. Faded paint, dust-caked windows. The man who stepped out looked like he belonged to the road. Sun-streaked skin, worn boots, a faded cap. He glanced my way, paused, then walked over slowly. "You okay, kid?" he asked, voice low but not unkind. I hesitated, swallowing the lump in my throat. "No," I said, "but I think I need help." He sat beside me on the curb without a word at first, his presence steady, unthreatening. The kind of quiet most people don't know how to offer. I didn't cry. That part of me had already shut off. "Want to tell me what happened?" he asked after a moment, not looking directly at me, but scanning the horizon like he was giving me space to lie or not. "My mom left me here. I don't know why," I said. My voice sounded too even, like I'd already accepted it. Or maybe I was afraid if I said it with feeling, I'd shatter in front of this stranger. He nodded once, slow, then reached into the cab of his truck and pulled out a bottle of water. "You got somewhere safe to go?" I took the bottle, hesitating. "No, I was supposed to. It doesn't matter." He didn't press, just stood and said, "I'm heading toward Little Rock. There's a bus depot not far from there. I can drop you, no strings." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I asked to borrow his phone. I still wanted to believe that someone would reach for me if I reached out first. He handed me the phone, unlocked. I dialed Janie. She picked up on the third ring, voice bright. "Lumen? Oh my God, I was just talking about your birthday. How's the surprise?" I exhaled hard. "Janie, listen, I need help. My mom, she left me. I don't know where I am. Some gas station in Arkansas. She drove me here and just left." Silence on the other end. Then her tone shifted. "Wait, what? Are you sure this isn't just another one of your family drama things? Maybe your mom's just giving you space? She dropped me here, took my purse, drove away. That's not space. I just think maybe she's trying some tough love thing. You know, push you to fly kind of deal." "Janie, I'm stranded." A pause. Then, "Look, just don't blow this out of proportion. Maybe take a breath before making it a thing." The line went dead a second after I said her name again. I handed the phone back to the man. "Guess I'm headed to Little Rock." He didn't say anything, just nodded like he understood more than I'd told him. We climbed into his truck, the engine rumbling like it had something to prove. We didn't talk. I appreciated that. The ride stretched under a sun that kept glaring through the windshield. I counted exit signs and tried not to count thoughts. Every time I started to feel something, anger, grief, even relief, I shut it down. He dropped me near the bus depot with a short, "Take care of yourself, kid." "I will," I said, meaning it more than I expected. The bus station was the opposite of welcoming. The walls were stained with years of comings and goings, of stories like mine and worse. The clerk behind the counter barely looked up when I asked about buses to Asheville. "Next one's tomorrow. You can wait inside till we close, but overnight you'll need to figure out your own spot." I found a corner near a plug and sat. My phone was dead, so I plugged it in, just waiting for enough juice to light up the screen. Around me, life moved. People argued, kids cried. A man across the room cursed at a vending machine that stole his last dollar. None of it touched me. I watched a woman in scrubs tie her child's shoes, adjust his tiny backpack, and kiss the top of his head. She whispered something, and he giggled, clinging to her for a second longer than needed. It didn't hurt because it reminded me of what I'd missed. It hurt because I'd never had it to begin with. I closed my eyes for a moment. When I opened them, my phone lit up. A notification. Instagram. Callista posted a photo. Just us girls today. Finally free. There they were, my mother and my sister, sitting at a trendy brunch spot with mimosas, smiles like toothpaste ads, a cake between them with pink frosting and gold candles. The caption read, "Family healing grateful." I stared at the screen until it dimmed, unsure if I wanted to scream, cry, or just delete myself from their history altogether. I held the paper like it was a lifeline. For the first time in days, I felt like someone, somewhere, still believed I mattered. The ride back to Asheville wasn't easy to afford, but I made it work with the emergency fare card Merrick had quietly slipped into my backpack before he left. I didn't ask for it, but I didn't reject it either. Pride doesn't keep you warm at night or get you home. Home. That word didn't mean what it used to. By the time I reached the driveway, it was late morning. The same trees lined the sidewalk. The same potted plants Callista had arranged, like it was a staged home for a catalog shoot. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. I knocked. No answer. The housekeeper opened the door. Not Martha, the longtime help who'd known me since I was little, but someone new. Young, polite, unfamiliar. "They're not here," she said. "They mentioned you might show up, but you're not allowed inside." I blinked. "I'm... not what?" She didn't repeat it, just offered a weak smile and shut the door like she was closing a deal. As I stood there, I noticed the mailbox. The brass nameplate had always read Vale. Now it just said Finch. No trace of me, not even in metal. I didn't knock again. I walked away, holding on to my breath like it might break loose if I didn't. By early afternoon, I was at the county clerk's office, standing in line behind a woman arguing about a parking ticket. The clerk who finally called me up had the kind of face that was good at staying neutral. "I need to check a property deed," I said, keeping my voice steady. He took the address, typed it in, then paused. "Are you a legal party on this property?" "I was," I replied. "Before my birthday." He raised an eyebrow, but handed me a printed record anyway. I scanned the page, already knowing what I'd find. And there it was, signed over last week, 3 days before I turned 18. Owner, Valora Finch. Witness, Callista Meyer. I asked if I could get a copy. He handed it to me without a word. I left the building with paper in hand and a bitterness in my mouth I couldn't swallow. They hadn't just waited until I was old enough to be on my own. They timed it like a business deal. Calculated, clean, cold. By late afternoon, I ended up at the public library, using a guest computer in the back, where no one could see the screen or my face. I logged into the old shared folder Callista, and I used in high school. She hadn't removed me, probably forgot it existed. I opened the folder labeled Apps and Essays, and there it was, my college essay. The one I'd rewritten a dozen times, the one I'd cried over at 2 a.m. The title had been changed, Callista Meyer, Scholarship Final.pdf. I clicked it open. Every word was mine, even the typo I'd purposely left in the third paragraph to make it feel human. I ran a reverse search, found the press release from the scholarship committee. Callista Meyer had received their Community Vision Award the previous spring. She used my words, my story, my pain. And once again, no one had questioned it. I closed the tab, logged out. At a diner down the street, I ordered the cheapest cup of coffee they had. The waitress didn't ask me how my day was. I was thankful for that. I grabbed a napkin, smoothed it flat on the table, and wrote, "Erase me from the records, and I'll write my own." I stared at those words until the ink bled a little from the heat of the cup. When the bill came, I reached for it and found an envelope tucked beneath. No return address, just my name in familiar handwriting. Inside was a photocopy of a deed, my grandmother's house, my name on it, clear, undeniable. Attached was a sticky note in slanted script. "She wanted you to have this, I kept a copy. TC. My chest tightened. My fingers gripped the edges of the paper like it might vanish if I let go. I held the paper like it was a lifeline. For the first time in days, I felt like someone, somewhere, still believed I mattered. By the next morning, that feeling had been buried under a fresh wave of disgust. Callista's face was everywhere. I'd opened Instagram to check bus times, but there she was, front and center, with the caption, "Reclaiming Joy from Family Toxicity. My Journey." The video opened with soft music, her standing on a yoga mat, speaking in that gentle voice she used when she wanted people to see her as centered and wise. "We had to make hard decisions," she said, posing in a perfect warrior stance. "But sometimes removing someone toxic is an act of love." The next clip, brunch with Valora, laughing over mimosas. No mention of me, not even as a shadow. Her erasure campaign had evolved, now wrapped in self-help jargon and aesthetics. She wasn't just denying what they did, she was monetizing it. 30,000 views, comments like, "So brave," and "Family healing is hard but worth it," flooded the feed. I didn't comment, I didn't react. Instead, I showed up. Her cafe wasn't far from downtown. Mire and Light, the kind of space with reclaimed wood, soft music, and overpriced matcha. Every inch curated, every photo perfectly staged. I asked for her at the counter, keeping my tone level. They directed me to the back patio. She was already sitting there, sipping tea, dressed in a linen jumpsuit like she'd just stepped off a wellness retreat. "I knew you'd come," she said without looking up. "You always need closure." I sat down, slow. I don't need closure. I need the truth. She raised her eyebrows, gave a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You've always been dramatic, Lumen." "That word again," I said. "It's your favorite when you want to shut me down." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Mom's already nervous. If you stop digging through legal stuff, I'll do a video. Say sorry, publicly. We'll spin it." I stared at her. "You want to package your apology like it's a Black Friday deal?" She didn't blink. "This is what people respond to. Real forgiveness doesn't trend. Sympathy does." I pushed back my chair. "If you'd just owned what you did, instead of selling it, maybe I'd have stayed quiet." She looked at me then. Really looked. And for a brief second, her face cracked. But only for a second. I walked out without waiting for a response. Later that night, I sat in my borrowed apartment above a bookstore, drinking weak tea and listening to the radiator hiss. I opened my laptop, checked my blog's inbox. One new message. Subject: "She did the same to me, long before you." The body of the email was short. I couldn't speak then, but I can now. "Isolde Pen." Her words sat in my inbox like a ticking clock. Suddenly, I wasn't just the target. I was part of a pattern. I reread that sentence 3 times, heart racing. If the will was changed, when and how? By morning, I was in Merrick's truck, riding toward the Missouri border. I hadn't told him much, just that I needed a few days away, somewhere quiet where people didn't speak in hashtags or make apologies like PR statements. He offered without judgment, just nodded and cleared out a spot for my bag beside the glove compartment. We drove for hours without saying much. It was better that way. The quiet let me think without spiraling. Somewhere past mile marker 218, the CB radio crackled to life with usual trucker banter. I wasn't listening until I heard my mother's name, spoken like it belonged to folklore. "Heard Valora Finch pulled another one of her stunts," one voice said. "That lady's cold. Remember '07? The breath left my lungs before I realized I'd stopped breathing. I turned slowly toward Merrick, who kept his eyes on the road, but his grip on the wheel tightened. "You okay?" he asked, too casually. "How do you know her name?" My voice wasn't angry. It was something worse, calm, with a question that knew it didn't want the answer. He didn't respond right away. Just took the next exit, pulling off at a rest area surrounded by trees that looked like they'd been left behind by time. We sat under the shade of a broken picnic shelter. He reached into the glove box and handed me a faded photo. A woman in her early 30s, standing outside a community center with Valora, both smiling. The date on the back said 2006. "That's my sister," he said. "Back then, she worked with your mom on a literacy program for single mothers. Small town stuff. Real impact. Until Valora found a way to pin some financial issue on her." "What happened?" "She lost her job, reputation, everything. Valora stayed squeaky clean." I stared at the photo. The woman looked kind, honest. "Why didn't you say something?" He shrugged. "Because I didn't want to believe someone that polished could be that strategic. But you're not walking blind. That's your difference." We drove the rest of the way in silence. By the next day, I was back at the Asheville Public Library, hunched over a desk in the records archive, Merrick beside me with a quiet kind of watchfulness. I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for proof. I searched Valora's name in public filings. A familiar pattern emerged. Property transfers, emergency guardianships, reassigned titles, always right before someone's birthday. Always in her favor. Always with some justification that sounded reasonable. Mental health concerns, relocation needs, family instability. She didn't make personal attacks. She built legal traps. I sat back, staring at the paper trail. It wasn't personal. It was a strategy. I was one of many. I opened my laptop and started typing. Not a rant, not a scream into the void. Just a clear, factual post. Erased on paper, ignored in presence. But here I am, writing back. I added screenshots, quotes, timelines. Then I ended with a message. If anyone else has felt this, message me. I'm listening. That night, I stayed in a small motel room outside the city. It smelled like old carpet and air freshener that gave up halfway through the job. I didn't sleep much, but around 2:30 a.m., my inbox pinged. Not one reply. 10. Most said thank you. One stood out. No greeting. No filler. "She didn't just erase you. She erased the will." I laughed. Not bitter. Just done. She thought this was harassment? No. It was just the opening statement. 7 days earlier, the message about the will had landed like a stone in my gut. I spent the first hour staring at the screen, rereading it, hovering over the sender's address. Eventually, I responded with one sentence. "How do you know this?" The reply came 3 minutes later. A name, a year, a county record number. The next morning, I was standing outside a records office in Boone County, Missouri, with a cup of vending machine coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard and something metallic. The clerk was helpful, not curious. She pulled the requested document from a weathered archive drawer without question, handed it over like it was a receipt. There it was. My grandmother's original will. My name, listed clearly as the inheritor of her home and trust, dated a year before she died. But the version Valora submitted, sealed and notarized, was dated 3 days before my 18th birthday. I scanned both versions side by side in disbelief. My name removed. Callista's added as witness. Valora named sole executor. The reason? Beneficiary exhibits signs of emotional instability. No diagnosis, no record. Just a statement signed under her guardianship. I left the building with shaking hands and a photocopy of both versions tucked inside my bag. The next stop was my bank. The account my grandmother opened for me at 13, part birthday gift, part safety net. I hadn't touched it in months. The woman at the desk was kind. She listened carefully, then frowned as she typed. "I'm sorry, but the account was closed 3 days before your 18th birthday. The funds were transferred out under a notarized power of attorney." "How much?" She paused. $14,200. "Where did it go?" "That record is sealed." I didn't argue, just nodded, stood, and walked out like I hadn't just watched years of savings vanish into a familiar black hole. By evening, I had a job. A local coffee shop on the edge of downtown. Quiet, cash-based, no questions. I worked under a fake name, no paperwork. The manager called me L. I said thank you and didn't correct him. The job was simple: pour, serve, clean, smile. In the back room, between shifts, I printed everything: deed records, Callista's scholarship post, bank transfer logs, that day's cease and desist letter, signed by Valora in a pen I recognized from her nightstand drawer. They didn't just want me out. They wanted me deleted, broke, powerless, untraceable. But I wasn't gone. I was working. That Thursday afternoon, I walked into a community legal aid center with a manila folder thick with proof. The receptionist looked up. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, "but I have a case." The attorney they paired me with was young, sharp eyes, patient ears. She read every line, every copy. When she got to the will documents, she leaned back in her chair. "If what you're saying is accurate," she said, tapping the paper with a capped pen, "this isn't just a family dispute. It's a legal fraud, potential civil liability, and emotional duress under guardianship." She paused. "We'll take it, pro bono." I didn't cry. I just nodded. That night, I returned to the cafe for my shift. I clocked in, pulled espresso, wiped counters. It was after close when the delivery guy came in with a certified letter addressed in Valora's handwriting. The manager handed it over. "Looks serious." I opened it slowly, already knowing what was inside. Cease and desist. Immediately refrain from all public accusations, digital content, and any direct or indirect communication concerning the Finch family, its affiliates, or estate. I smiled as I folded it back up. This wasn't a warning. It was acknowledgement. I tucked the cease and desist into my apron pocket like it was a receipt, not a threat. Back behind the counter, I wiped down the espresso machine, counted tips, restocked lids. Routine was my rebellion now, doing the small things like they didn't try to erase me. It wasn't just the language of the letter that hit. It was the absence. No greeting, no sign-off, not even my name, just former dependent. Like I'd been a line item in a spreadsheet they'd long since deleted. 2 days later, I was wiping down a corner table after the lunch rush when I found a napkin folded under a plate. Not unusual. What was strange was the writing on it. "Hey, are you okay? I remember you. You wrote that piece about grief in 10th grade. Still think about it." "Mr. Ellery?" I stared at the name. Mr. Ellery had been my sophomore English teacher. Quiet, kind, always smelled like coffee and chalk. I barely remembered what I'd written, some essay about losing my childhood dog and pretending not to care. But apparently, he hadn't forgotten it. I slid the note into my pocket. Didn't say anything to my coworkers, but for the first time in a while, my chest didn't feel like it was locked shut. That night, I opened my blog and uploaded a screenshot of Valora's letter. No commentary, just the image and a line. If you needed proof this was real, here's your invitation to the war they tried to bury. No adjectives, no accusations, just timestamps, scanned documents, a digital paper trail of betrayal. The post got picked up within the hour by a small advocacy group that focused on guardianship abuse. They didn't ask for permission. They just shared it with a caption. Another voice they didn't expect to speak. By morning, Callista struck back. She posted a video with soft piano music in the background, her makeup flawless, hair tucked behind her ear like she was talking to a friend instead of a camera. "We tried," she said, her voice trembling in a way only the camera could see. "But some people just want to stay hurt. Please respect our silence." The comments were a war zone. Some called her brave. Others called her a liar. And a handful asked one thing. "Where's Lumen?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I disabled comments on my own blog and added a line beneath my last post. Silence isn't peace. It's protection. For them, not for us. That night, after close, I sat in the storage room with a cup of leftover drip coffee. I was scrolling through email replies when one name made me sit upright. Subject: Still got your back. From Ava Penn, Valora's niece. They don't know I'm writing this, but I think it's time someone told you what really happened after the funeral. For the first time, it wasn't my voice echoing the truth. It was theirs unraveling. 5 days later, Ava and I sat on a park bench under a faded gazebo where the paint peeled like it had secrets of its own. She handed me a manila envelope and kept her eyes on the creek beside us. She made me promise I'd only give this to you if things got like this, Ava said. I opened it carefully. Inside was a crisp copy of my grandmother's will, dated, notarized, and untouched. My name was there, bold and unmissable, sole heir. Every page bore my grandmother's handwriting, notes in the margins, even a smiley face next to the kitchen renovation clause. It was real. It was full of her. She gave me this a month before she died, Ava whispered. She said, just in case Valora does what Valora does. I should have come forward sooner. You did now, I said. That's enough. Back at the Legal Aid Center, I placed the document on the desk between me and my attorney. Her eyes widened as she read through it, page by page, then reached for her tablet. We're filing for motion immediately, she said. This changes everything. The motion to present the will, and its accompanying proof of tampering, was submitted that same afternoon. Within 24 hours, a hearing was set. The judge, a woman in her late 60s, with the demeanor of a weathered stone wall, didn't even blink as she set the date. The courtroom was colder than I remembered, not in temperature, but in tone. Valora entered with a fresh blowout, and her lawyer, a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Callista trailed behind them, wearing oversized sunglasses indoors and holding a notebook like it might shield her from consequences. They didn't look at me. Valora's attorney made a motion to dismiss within the first 10 minutes. Baseless, manufactured, irrelevant. My lawyer responded with one word. Recording. From the bench, the judge gestured. Play it. We queued up the audio, ripped from Merrick's CB radio cache, cleaned just enough to make every word land like a punch to the ribs. Cut her off before she turns 18. I don't want to leave loopholes. Silence. It wasn't just the room that stilled. Valora's hand froze mid-note. Callista stopped doodling in her notebook. The judge leaned back, steepled her fingers, and said, Motion to dismiss is denied. My lawyer handed over the original will. The judge flipped through it, nodded once, then looked at Valora's side. This will is entered into evidence. You have until next week to submit a rebuttal. When we walked out, the air hit me like I'd held my breath the whole time and forgotten how to exhale. Press waited on the steps. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. The story spread faster than any family brunch post could. Finch family fraud trended on Twitter by sunset. My blog, which had peaked at a few thousand clicks, hit 200,000 views overnight. That evening, as I sat in my apartment, sipping tea and trying not to collapse from emotional fatigue, Callista posted a story. Just one line, white text on a black screen. Sometimes you think you're protecting someone. Turns out you were just covering up. She laughed, not cruelly, like someone who'd waited years for that answer. It had only been 2 days since the courtroom, but it felt like a lifetime. My name was out there now, attached to something louder than silence. The headlines weren't mine, but they were about me. They used words like alleged, disputed, former guardian, but one local editorial didn't dance around it. The perfect Finch legacy was built on paper cuts. It landed on doorsteps the morning after the hearing. My face wasn't on the front page, but my grandmother's name was, alongside a quote from the will Valora tried to bury. Valora herself issued a press statement hours later. This is a misunderstanding being handled through the appropriate legal channels. We ask for privacy during this time. Funny how people who build their lives in public suddenly beg for shadows when the light turns harsh. I was halfway through a bowl of soup in the cafe's back room when a text came through from one of the paralegals on our legal team. Short and sharp. She fired him this morning. Her attorney, gone. The man who'd built her defense like a castle of ice now melted away. I leaned back, letting the news settle. Not satisfaction, Just confirmation. Later that night, I opened an email that made me pause before clicking. From Burner56 EmailNet. Subject. No subject. I didn't want to sign anything. She made me. I just wanted the attention, not this. Callista. I didn't write back. I didn't even save the message. I copied it into my archive and closed the tab. That wasn't an apology. That was debris from a ship she chose to sink. Around midnight, I logged into a Zoom meeting posted by an advocacy group called Echo House. They hosted support spaces for people dealing with family estrangement. I didn't plan to talk, just listen. The screen loaded. A grid of strangers filled the screen. Faces in dim rooms, a few with cameras off, names hidden behind usernames like sibling erased or grandchild ghosted. A moderator welcomed everyone, offered a short breathing exercise, and opened the floor. One woman spoke about being disowned for calling out financial abuse. Another man talked about being cut out of a trust after coming out. When it came my turn, I unmuted myself without knowing I would. I was removed from my own house and called toxic for asking questions, I said, voice steadier than expected. The person who raised me used the law to erase me. She left me on the side of the road and still said she was protecting me. A silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just witness. Then, in the chat, someone typed, "You're not alone. We're the daughters who came back with receipts." My screen blurred for a second. Maybe from my eyes. Maybe from the weight finally shifting. A private message popped up. "I work in estate law. If you ever want to pursue full civil recovery, I'm in." I replied, "Not for revenge, but for record. They told a story. Now I will too." The next morning, I was prepping espresso shots when my phone buzzed. I wiped my hands on a towel, picked it up, and froze at the name on the screen. Thelma Crane. I hadn't heard her voice in years, not since the funeral. She'd always been the quiet one at gatherings, the one Valora rolled her eyes at, called the hippie aunt who never grew up. But Thelma was the only one who hugged me like she meant it. She was the only one who didn't talk to me like I was a problem to manage. I stepped outside before answering. "Hello?" "Hey, sugar," she said. "You ready to see the house?" My throat tightened, but I answered. "Only if I walk in holding the key." 2 weeks later, I stood at the threshold of a different kind of door. One that wasn't locked, wasn't slammed shut, and didn't require a key to prove I belonged. But I still carried the key anyway, clasped tightly in my hand like a vow I'd made to myself. The invitation had come in the form of a simple email. "Would you consider speaking at our summit for women impacted by family estrangement and inheritance abuse?" At first, I'd closed it without replying. But then I reread the list of speakers, names I'd seen in my inbox before, on Zoom screens, in threads under my blog posts. One of them had been the woman who messaged me, "We're the daughters who came back with receipts." Thelma didn't push, but her quiet support hung in the air every time we spoke. "You don't have to go," she'd said, "but if you do, tell it the way it happened, not the way they want it remembered." So here I was. 2 weeks after the courtroom. 1 week after Callista's vague online retreat. And just a few days since Valora's new attorney issued another press statement that said everything and nothing at once. The summit was held in a repurposed school gymnasium, draped in soft cloth, faux plants, and folding chairs that didn't quite match. It wasn't glamorous. It was honest. I stood behind the stage curtain, wearing a simple black dress, and one item I hadn't worn since that day at the gas station, the red silk scarf. When the MC called my name, I walked on stage, the scarf draped around my fingers. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I unfolded the scarf and held it up. "I was blindfolded," I began, "but I was never blinded." A hush fell across the room. I was told it was a surprise, a gift, but what they meant was silence. What they gave me was absence. What they tried to erase was me. I talked for 7 minutes. About the will, the scholarship, the cease and desist letters, the photo of my mother and sister toasting my disappearance with champagne and hashtags, but I never named them. They don't get to be the headline anymore. The story belongs to me now. Someone in the front row cried. I kept going. Afterward, I didn't go backstage. I stayed and listened to the other women. One spoke about being cut off after reporting a family member's embezzlement. Another shared how her mother had forced her to sign over her college fund, promising it was temporary. Our stories weren't identical, but the erasure was. A local photographer had been in the audience. I hadn't noticed him until later that evening when the photo went live online. Me mid-sentence, scarf in hand, the words, Station of Severance, from abandoned to unbreakable, etched beneath. The post exploded. Within 24 hours, my inbox overflowed. I had a scarf like that too. That pose? That was me, in court, alone. My mother used the word toxic, like it was a stamp she could stick on my forehead and be done with me. Not all messages were kind. Some were from relatives of the women who'd spoken. Some were from strangers who called us bitter, attention-seeking, dramatic. But we weren't quiet anymore. Callista posted a statement the next day. We misunderstood the weight of what we did. This is her narrative now. We won't contest it. I read it 3 times. Not out of sentiment, but out of study. It wasn't an apology. It was a legal shield. It was distance disguised as grace. Still, it marked a shift. That evening, I returned to the lake house. My house. The air smelled like pine and old wood. The porch light flickered the way it always had. I checked the mailbox out of habit and found a small envelope with no return address. Inside was a photo. My grandmother holding me as a baby on that same porch, wrapped in the red scarf. On the back, in her handwriting, You were always meant to keep the light. Outside, the gravel crunched as their car pulled away. Inside, silence finally felt like peace, not punishment. I stayed near the door for a moment, listening. Not because I thought they might come back, but because it was the first time I hadn't flinched after watching them leave. The stillness wasn't something I had to survive anymore. It was something I'd earned. The light was changing. Slipping into that soft amber hue late afternoon gives you when the sun is starting to let go. I moved through the house slowly, my hand brushing the edge of the hallway walls, the worn banister of the back stairs, the spot in the dining room where the paint peeled a little. Every room carried her touch. My grandmother's, not Valora's, not Callista's, hers. When I reached the kitchen, I opened the drawer beneath the sink. Still smelled faintly of lemon oil and rust. Inside, tucked beneath a bundle of faded dish towels, was a sealed envelope. My name on the front. The handwriting was unmistakable. I sat down at the old table before opening it, my fingers steady this time. It was dated 6 months before she died. If you're reading this, the letter began, it means they tried what I feared. She knew. She knew what Valora was capable of. She knew it wasn't just dysfunction, it was deliberate. You have always been the one I trusted to carry the family's truth, she wrote. Not because you're the loudest, but because you see people clearly, even when it hurts. She ended with a line that sounded so much like her voice I could almost hear it in the room with me. The house is yours, not because of inheritance, but because it always knew your name. I folded the letter carefully, pressed it flat, and placed it on the table like something sacred. No tears, just breath, just a heartbeat slowing into something steady. The knock came just as the sun began dipping below the tree line. I didn't ask who it was. I already knew. I opened the door to see Valora and Callista standing there, side by side, like they had rehearsed this moment in the car ride over. Valora spoke first. We don't expect forgiveness, but maybe we can talk. Her voice wasn't firm. It wavered at the end, like she wanted to sound in control, but didn't quite believe herself. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I stepped outside, closed the screen door behind me, and stood in front of them. Talk? I said. Now that the story isn't just yours? Callista looked away. Valora inhaled sharply. I didn't know, she said. You did, I answered. You just didn't think I'd make it to the microphone. I could have shouted. I could have brought up the essay theft, The erased will, the scholarship, the bank accounts, the gas station. But I didn't. I didn't need to prove anything. You taught me what boundaries feel like, I said, by crossing every one of mine. I looked down at the porch beneath me, then back at them. Now I'm building some of my own. They start here, at this door. Valora's lips parted like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. Callista whispered, "Okay." I nodded once. "Take care." I went back inside and closed the door behind me, not with anger, but with certainty. The evening settled in. I brewed a cup of tea and lit one candle on the fireplace mantel, the kind my grandmother used to keep for storms. Above the mantel was a picture frame that had sat empty since the day I moved in. It had once held a photo of Valora's wedding, but I'd removed it weeks ago. Now I unfolded the letter, smoothed its creases, and slid it into the frame. "You made me visible again," I whispered. "I'll stay that way." And this time, I'm the author, the name on the deed, and the voice on the page. 6 months had passed since the courtroom, since the scarf speech, since the front door stayed shut behind me for the last time I saw them. Things didn't settle, they transformed. The lake house had changed too, not in foundation or structure, but in spirit. It no longer carried the weight of exile. It held the pulse of presence. The new sign was simple, metal, etched in black letters. Lumen House, for the unseen. It hung next to the front door, where the old Finch family nameplate had once been. Where the wind chimes used to ring hollow, now hung 3 brass bells donated by a woman named Diane, who left her husband after he cut off their daughter. Inside, we kept it simple. Open seating, no appointments. A bookshelf filled with journals left by women who had passed through and needed a place to leave their first truth. Some wrote full stories. Some left only names. One card just said, "Still here." There was a wall covered in notes, soft yellow slips with scribbles like, "I wasn't crazy," and "It wasn't my fault." They weren't confessions, they were confirmations, and none of them had names unless someone chose to write it. I didn't preach. That wasn't the point. I ran a small circle once a week. It wasn't therapy, just space, just voices. Sometimes it was just me and 3 women. Sometimes 10 showed up. One time, it was a father who'd been cut off from his son after a divorce poisoned by lies. He didn't talk much, just cried into his hands. That was allowed too. At the start of each circle, I said the same line. We don't fix people here. We remind them they were never broken. On a Tuesday morning, the bell over the door chimed and a girl walked in, maybe early 20s, maybe younger. Shoulders hunched, coat sleeves pulled over her hands. She looked around like she didn't know if she belonged. I greeted her the same way I greeted everyone. "Welcome in. There's coffee, tea, water, and quiet." She nodded and sat down near the bookshelf. We didn't speak for the first 20 minutes. Then, as I restocked a stack of flyers near the window, she said quietly, "My mother called me a shadow. I think she meant it as love, but it still felt cold." I didn't respond with advice. I just nodded and said, "It feels warmer here." She smiled. That night, after everyone left and the lights dimmed to the setting I'd programmed for evenings, soft amber, like candlelight, I stepped outside with my mug of tea and sat on the porch swing. The lake was still. The mist moved across it like a hush, not a haunting. I sipped slowly. Let the silence wrap around me. Not heavy, not lonely. Full. Inside, on the wall beside the mantel, the letter still hung in its frame. Below it sat a new photo, one taken by the same photographer who'd captured the scarf moment. This one was of the house's new front sign, bathed in morning light, with the shadows of 2 women walking up the steps. No one would know who they were, but I did. I traced the rim of my mug and whispered, not to the past, but to the now. I wasn't erased. I was rewritten by my own hand.